Okay, so what we wanted to do now was just spend a little bit of time looking forward. So I hope you see that there's maybe some potential in mindfulness with young people and bringing about positive social change. But the question is, how do we realise this? And so what we thought we'd do is share with you the youth mindfulness vision, if you like, of what we want to try and do. So where I thought I'd start was just looking at the research for mindfulness with young people. It's kind of in its early stages, but there's a lot of encouraging signs, and you see a lot of the same things that you see with adults. So reductions in things like aggression, hostility, and improvements in all these kind of social emotional capacities. And a meta study was done just last year, published last year, of about 20 studies, I think this was. Yeah, 20 studies, almost 2,000 young people. And we see kind of decent effect sizes, small to medium effect sizes for mindfulness courses for young people. So, and what's interesting as well for kids with clinical problems and clinical populations, we see stronger effect sizes than for kind of normal populations. So kids that are doing okay, it helps them, but there's not as big a kind of transformative impact, which is kind of understandable. You know, if a kid's really struggling with anger, they're always lashing out, and then they realise that they can be in their breath, well, there can be a big change in their behaviour. But for me personally, this is great. This is fantastic that we've got this science behind us, but if this is where we stop, we're never going to realise the potential of this. And so these courses, these mindfulness courses are here about 6 to 12 weeks long, and if we reduce mindfulness to a course, to an intervention, to 6 to 12 weeks, we're totally reducing the potential there. You know, one kind of an analogy is to think of somebody playing the piano. And if you take a bunch of people and they're learning to play the piano and they play for it, 45 minutes a day for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, they're going to be able to play a melody, rhythm. It's going to approximate music, you know. But if you were to ask, so how good is the piano? You'd think, well, it's a bit plinky plonky. Do you know what I mean? But if you hear somebody that's been playing for 20 years, a concert pianist, you think, wow, it's amazing, you know. And so these studies don't pick up what happens if kids practice for the whole school year, and what happens if they're part of a community that every day is nourishing mindfulness and nourishing compassion and nourishing kindness, you know? So while this is fantastic and it can help get policy people on board, we need to go way beyond this. And one thing that I think is also interesting, the way mindfulness has kind of come into the secular domain, is it's come in quite a kind of within the medical model, the clinical model, and within education, it's often come in as the education model. And so this is the model that you take this pill and you're cured, or you do this course and you understand the knowledge, right? The teacher kind of pours the knowledge like a jug of water into the student, But that's not how well-being works. It also operates off this kind of reductive cause and effect model that we have, that there's one cause and one effect. But with well-being, there's a multiplicity in causes and conditions that lead to well-being. Like if, for instance, if you look at this flower here, we could say that the cause of the flower is the seed. But if the rain wasn't there, if the fresh air wasn't there, if the soil wasn't there, how could the flower manifest, So in order for well-being to arise, actually you need a multiplicity of causes and conditions, And so we have to think in an organic, an ecological or a horticultural model of well-being. And so well-being is something that we have to attend to and water the positive seeds of well-being on a daily basis. And what's also interesting, I think, is that, again, if you think of in terms of kind of the natural world, the effect can then also become the cause. So if you have a forest full of trees, these trees need fresh air, they need soil, they need clean water. But then, of course, the trees actually improve the quality of the air, and they improve the quality of the soil, and they improve the quality of the water that comes. So there's this kind of cyclical effect, And so in the same way, if mindfulness comes in and a young kid can start to realize it in their own life, and the teacher brings it to them, then that kid mindfulness becomes a living reality for them. And then that effect then becomes the cause of other people's well-being and the cause of their own future well-being. And this is all to your guys' kind of, reciprocal teacher model, that it continues and continues and continues. So our belief is that mindfulness courses are not going to get us there. They're fun, they're really, really important, they're vital, and good pedagogy, ways of engaging are going to be a great start, but they are just a foundation, and what we really need is mindful communities. So, yeah, mindful community is the way forward.
Another thing that we've been thinking about is one of the things that makes mindfulness so compelling for those of us who work with young people is that mindfulness isn't an ideology. You know, it's not a set of ideas that you have to subscribe to. It's not a policy approach. It doesn't come from the top down. It really begins in such an intimate way in the engaged practice of the person who connects with mindfulness. So it starts in this, you know, this very intimate coming to know one's own breathing. The sense of tuning into the stillness and the aliveness of your own body, of coming to recognize the landscape of your emotions and your thoughts. So it's a very direct experience, it's a felt experience that we connect with. Initially we connect with, and then it changes the way that we relate with our own experience, with our own difficulties, with our own challenges, maybe in the teaching environment, and then with the way that we relate to others. And then it seems that, you know, maybe one or two other people, they begin to see that, they begin to connect into that. You know, you begin to kind of, mindfulness is an energy that's felt by others. So other people begin to join us in that practice. And that seems to be the way that a community is organically grown. It starts in this small, intimate place, and then it moves outward. And this is very true of my own experience in beginning to bring mindfulness into further education. So I never went into the classroom and sort of disseminated a lesson on the wonderfulness of mindfulness to my students. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. I came back from having been taught by the teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, and I was so taken with the attentiveness and grace with which he cleaned the whiteboard, you know, really in his breath. And I decided that I would make that part of my practice. So it would be like a mindfulness bell between lessons at the end of a class. I would just really slowly connect with the movement in my hand in cleaning the whiteboard. And my students noticed this. It was a social science class, and they asked me, "Lindsay, why do you do everything so slowly?" I'd also sort of taken mindful movement into my way of walking around the class. They kind of caught me off guard, so I said, "Oh, it's something I practice." "What do you practice?" "It's kind of like a meditation technique." And then they said to me, "Does that mean you wear a nappy and say Om?" Not every day, not every day. So we had a discussion about what mindfulness is, and then it's like they leaned in. It's like they recognized there's something in that makes me curious. There's something about that way of being that I'm interested in. And then they asked, "Will you teach us this practice?" So we started practicing mindfulness in the classroom. And that seems to have been the experience of many people that have trained with me in mindfulness facilitation skills. They've had their own practice, and they've learned a little bit about how to communicate the practice. One of the lecturers who trained with me also talked about bringing mindful walking into the college where she works. And her students noticed that she walked in a very different way from everyone else in the college. And she walked like a free person, not pulled on this like rope of like planning and doing all of the time. So they were curious, you know, why is it that you walk in that way? So again, they kind of move toward, when Michael talks about being an environment, I think that what we do with mindfulness, we become an environment that people move toward. One of her colleagues asked her, "I hope you don't mind me asking you, but have you fallen in love recently?" And it connects that they recognize there's something of the energy of love. That's what it is. It's not romantic love, but it's part of the way that she's now living her life. And the students are moving toward that. So I think one of our visions at Youth Mindfulness is how can we nurture that in each of us as practitioners, this gift. You have a practice. Your practice is in your body. Your practice is your way of being. And then the environment will grow. It organically grows from that. We don't need to pitch anything. We don't need to sell anything. We become something, and people move toward our way of being. That's how we share it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that this is not to say that mindfulness is a panacea that's going to solve all of society's ills. You know, I think many of us, I think, will work in contexts where there's systems that are detrimental to well-being. There's targets we have to meet, and there's a way of doing things that kind of is going to cause stress. You know, and so a lot of the schools I go into, I see a lot of stressed out teachers because there's so much to do, and there's so much paperwork to do, and the head teachers are stressed, you know, and then naturally that kind of comes to the kids. So, I mean, you know, what Sahari was talking about, if we live in an economy and a society that is deeply unequal, and these kind of larger structures and processes are not conducive to well-being, we shouldn't kid ourselves on and think, well, if we're all mindful, and that we don't need to change these other elements, you know. So it's not to say that this stuff isn't important, because it certainly is. I think, though, that mindfulness can still open our eyes to help us open our eyes to the ways that the system might change and that we might be able to improve things. But I guess the core, as Lindsay was talking about, is that one lever, if you like, of well-being, one way that we can impact well-being is through mindfulness and through our own personal practice. And so this is kind of what we want to, our vision now. We've been teaching mindfulness to kids, thousands of young people, you know, young kids, teenagers, young offenders, and what we really want to now do is support other people and be able to share this practice. So I'm going to just very, very quickly run through some of the things that we have planned for the coming year and the future. So one is an 8-week course for adults that we've developed, Mindfulness for Life, and we're going to be running this course in the summertime. And one of the reasons that we developed, there's a lot of 8-week courses out there in mindfulness, but one of the reasons that we developed this course is because mindfulness-based stress reduction is really quite a lot of emphasis on helping people deal with stress and chronic pain. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy has an emphasis on helping people cope with depression. And so we wanted to bring in some of the elements of cultivating kindness, and especially cultivating joy. Like, actually, that mindfulness can be a way to be more in touch with, you know, what today, when we came back in from the fire alarm, I was like, wow, what a condition of happiness that we're in this room that we weren't in touch with, probably weren't in touch with, you know, until like you really recognise that we're not standing outside the rain for 3 hours, you know. So we got, you know, very practice orientated, very much inspired by the 8-week courses that are already out there. But there's certain elements that we wanted to do that we thought would be and more appropriate for people that maybe aren't struggling with really serious chronic depression or chronic pain or something, but are living, you know, the life, and they just want to enhance their life and live more fully. You know, the other thing we're doing is developing an app for it. And one of the things that I've often found in teaching teachers or professionals is that we all have such busy lives. And the reason we wanted to develop an app and have people move through kind of a different meditation every day, so that they have this sense of progression through it, and so they can be really supported. Like, nobody has CD players anymore, do you know what I mean? And so it's just a sense of really helping to support people as much as we can in the practice. The other thing we've been doing a lot of, and we'll focus a lot of energy on now, is curriculum training. So we're already teaching how to teach the kids program, and this is for people that have got their own mindfulness practice, and are already making mindfulness a reality in their own lives, and then they want to bring it to young kids. And we'll be hopefully launching the Teens Train to Teach program in 2016. And when you come in these 5-day trainings, like, every lesson is delivered as it would be in the classroom. And there's also a chance to kind of practice the key skills and explore the pedagogy, explore how you bring this to different kids, how you bring this to a kid that's got really attentional difficulties, how you bring this to a kid that, you know, has maybe autism or Asperger's, how you bring this to a kid that punches kids in the face all the time, you know, how do we do these kind of different things? So that's what the curriculum training is for. And then our other key thing, and this is kind of our flagship, is a 1-year training program, and this is really focused on developing personal practice, because it's really the practice, it's really making the practice alive and strong in you that has more impact then any training manual, any PowerPoint slide, any video you can show kids, it's your way of being. So Lindsay's going to say a little bit more about our 1-year training.
Yeah, so the goal of the 1-year training is to really nourish the practice of the practitioner who may wish to go on and perhaps share their practice with others. So we'd like to start it with a 5-day residential mindful living retreat, which starts this July if you're interested. And the intention in that retreat is just to fully live all of our actions in the spirit of mindfulness. So walking to breakfast in mindfulness, eating breakfast in mindfulness, chopping vegetables for lunch in mindfulness, brushing our teeth in mindfulness, as well as talks and community sharing, mindful listening. And then after that 5-day retreat, we plan to run 4 weekends that are paced through the course of the year. And the structure of those 4 weekends is really around the 4 foundations of mindfulness and their integration into everyday life. So really reflecting on mindfulness of the body. Do a weekend just on the body and on eating and on movement, how we live in our bodies, how we relate to our bodies. Do we rest? And applying that in our relating, in our relationships, in our work. And then a weekend on mindfulness of feeling, and really exploring feeling, including gratitude and joy and kindness. Mindfulness of thoughts, awareness of the mind. And then a weekend on some of the wisdom practices at the end. And again, thinking about how is this becoming alive in our life? How do we nourish this to be alive in our life? And then closing with a 5-day residential retreat again at the close of the year. And in that retreat, we would like to give the opportunity to explore how is it that I might be able to share the practice that I've developed with others? How do I communicate the practice? How do I guide? How do I do inquiry? And maybe also talk a little bit about how you build mindful communities. It can be challenging, to go into your place of work and start a new community if that's not part of the culture of your workplace already. So we can explore, what are some of the challenges and the delights of that. And I guess the real thinking with the 1-year training is embodiment and community. So we would really like the 1-year training to be mindfulness, not a should in your life. It becomes part of your cells. It becomes part of the way that life is vivid to you. Because these are the practices that I love. These are the practices that I connect with. What is meaningful in my mindfulness practice for me that I can nourish. And that we do so in an environment that's really supported by a community of practitioners. Those of us who've been practicing for some time know how valuable it is, maybe even essential it is, that we have a community that we practice in, that we can go back and kind of share our difficulties and share our inspirations. And as we're kind of forging new paths for mindful communities, be supported by the people that are learning to live and to work in this way.
Yeah. One other thing to mention about the 5-day retreat at the end is practitioners on the 5-day retreat will also learn how to teach the 8-week course. So our hope is that once people have been through that year-long training, they really develop their own practice, they can go back to their own school, their own place of work, their own prison, if the social work office, wherever it is, and then they can share that practice and start, and it kind of spreads out in that kind of organic way. If mindfulness comes as a policy, some people say, oh, wouldn't it be great if the government really just got behind it? And I kind of think, in a way, no, because it would be, but if it comes down from the policy and mindfulness is the new thing, everybody must do mindfulness, you're just going to get everybody like, oh, what is this thing, breathing and all that, and it's
another outcome. Don't want it to be another outcome.
Exactly, it's going to be a disaster, So actually, when it grows up and it's authentic, that's the best way forward, I think. So that's our vision. The other thing that we're mention is that we're going to become a charity. So it was funny. We were out with our friends from Baltimore last night, and we were talking about our kind of histories, And Andy was telling me about how years ago, the guys were doing the work, they had no money, and they started an events company, like doing music and stuff to try and fund a non-profit. And I was like, wow, you know, for the first 18 months of Youth Mindfulness, I was playing piano and stuff in bars, and so we were both doing the same thing, trying to fund the work, you know. And as Youth Mindfulness has grown, I never gave any thought to like what legal structure, what we do. It was just me, and then we started a limited company and stuff. But as things have grown, it become more and more clear to me that it doesn't feel right for this to be a company that I would own, you know. It doesn't seem in alignment with what we're trying to do, you know. I want my mindfulness in this country to be a movement, you know. And so in the spirit of community, we thought, like, you know, a charity is the best way forward. So we decided to become a charity, and we're moving in that direction. And also what we're launching today is a fundraising campaign that we're hopefully launching this week. To try and help us raise funds to do all the stuff that we want to do and move things forward. You know, when we Youth Mindfulness over the last 4 years, we haven't had any grants, any funding from anybody to do any of this work. You know, it's all been kind of, you know, Lana Lindsay's full-time jobs, and it's all in their extra time. Do you know what I mean? So we're starting a fundraising campaign. We'll be sending out emails. If you guys can donate anything, if you happen to be a millionaire, like a secret millionaire in the audience, that's amazing, you know. Donate tons of money. And if you can, no problem. You can share it on Facebook, maybe other people, you never know. So we're really, in a way, our hope is to support people that want to bring this work to kids, but and also we need more support now as well, you know. So that's the kind of rationale in becoming a charity and that kind of stuff. The last thing I wanted to touch on was just to leave with this thought. I remember seeing a TED talk by Ken Robinson, the education specialist, and he spoke about how public education came into being in the kind of mid-late 19th century. And he said, you know, at the time this was a radical idea, the idea that you would have public education free at the point of use, available to all children, mandatory from the ages of like maybe 7 to 13 or something. This was radical. And there's so many people at the time that said, you can't do this. You know, the slum kids in Glasgow or Liverpool, they're not going to be able to learn to read and to write and then actually grapple with things like algebra or understand the classics. Why are you wasting your time with this? We shouldn't do this, you know. But people did it anyway, and now, you know, well, you know, literacy rates across the world are now, you know, moving towards 98, 99%. And in a way, I think we have a similar challenge in front of us. The task is, how can we improve well-being, you know, for young people and for society? And I think it's so important that we're ambitious about this, that we don't do this in just a kind of piecemeal way, you know, that we just, we do a happiness lesson, or we do a wee bit more salad at lunch. That's great, but it's like well-being and flourishing for these young people. It's so much more than that, you know. And I think all of us have so much power in us just by coming back to our breath, just by coming in touch and practicing this art of connection, moment by moment. And if we do that ourselves and take that forward and connect with our staff, our family, our friends, and the kids we work with, and help them to realize that they have this capacity as well, then, you know, who knows where we'll be in 20 years' time, you know? So I guess that's where I would like to leave it today. So thank you so much for your attendance. And